Okay, so I am starting to see something. Oh, hello there, class. It's Miss Tran. Today we are going to be delving into our lecture on understanding narrative points of view. Now, these pair of glasses are going to give you a head start as to what we are looking at today. So first, let's start with these set of images. So take a look here. What exactly do you think this is? Well, if I'm taking a look at that, you might see that it's kind of porous. It's a mucousy yellow color. It's very dark. It has some kind of hair or fringe going on. You're not really sure what it is, but you're kind of intruding in on the image, and you can see it's really close-up details and traits. So let's zoom out a bit. Let's put on our glasses, zoom out a bit, and see actually what we have there is a bee. So how exactly does this relate to points of view and narratives? We're going to get into that, but keep in mind these two images as our anticipatory set for today, because points of view directly leads to how close or how far we are to characters in a story, just as how close up we are to this image of the bee, and also how far away we are from this image of the bee. Okay, now moving on, we have what is the narrative point of view. So in other words, the narrative point of view refers to the perspective from which a text is written. So the perspective means that we're taking a different set of lens to kind of either zoom in on a story or zoom out of a story. And it's the relationship that's established between the narrator and the character. So in a way, the narrator either provides information for the reader by being this all-knowing kind of speaker, or they're kind of withholding information from the reader by kind of zooming in on just one character or a limited number of characters. And we're going to get into more detail about that, just to be more specific. So altogether, we have three different types of points of view. The first person refers to just talking about oneself. The second person, as we see here with Uncle Sam, refers to you, yes, you. And the third person refers to having knowledge of all characters. So this is kind of the umbrella of what we're going to be talking about today. And the first one that we're going to talk about is first person. So first person point of view refers to how the narrator is in the story and refers to him or herself. So the common pronouns that are used include I, me, us, we, our, my, and this is very evident in young adolescent literature. It allows the reader to get into the world of the protagonist by joining in on his or her emotions, mental processes, and it establishes a fairly close distance between you as the reader and the narrator. Now, what exactly what do I mean by this? So to put it in more perspective, we have Percy Jackson. I'm pretty sure that we've read or we've seen a few Percy Jackson movies by Rick Riordan. And what I mean is this. So we have an excerpt from Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson, and Percy himself says, look, I didn't want to be half-blood. If you're reading this because you think you might be one, my advice is close this book right now. Believe whatever your mom or dad told you about your birth and try to lead a normal life. So we see here highlighted in red that he uses pronouns such as I and my, and you're getting directly into the character's head, in this case Percy Jackson, and you're understanding from his point of view that this is what it's like to be a half-blood. Now don't confuse yourself even though he's saying you. You yourself, you're not exactly him as a character, but you're involved in his mental processes and what he's thinking emotionally as he's engaging you throughout the story. So that is first person point of view. The second person narrative point of view is least commonly used in literature. So this is when the narrator tells you directly that you are the protagonist, you are the one guiding the story, and you are the main character who's immersed in the action of the story. So this one might not or may be familiar, and it's an excerpt from Jay McGurney's Bright Lights, Big City, and he says this: you have friends who actually care about you and speak the language of the inner self. You have avoided them of late. Your soul is as disheveled as your apartment, and until you can clean it up a little, you don't want to invite anyone inside. Now, the first person and second person, they are similar in the way that they get us, as in readers, involved. But there's a big difference. In first person narration, there's a separation between the I of the protagonist and you as the I. Whereas in second person, you are the character and you are the protagonist leading the story. That's the main difference. So keep that in mind. The third person narrative point of view comes with two different types. The first being third person limited, and that means that the narrator is confined to one single character, the thought of one single character, and he refers to that character as he, she, they, or them. So this is just one character, therefore making it very limited for the narrator to tell a story from that one person's view, hence the image right there. And to bring in an example that we might be familiar with, we have J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter Chamber of Secrets. So, in the Chamber of Secrets, we have Harry had taken up his place at the wizard school, where he and his scar were famous. But now the school year was over, and he was back with the Dursleys for the summer. So, this is third person limited. Why? Well, we have the pronoun. We have he, his, and Harry being his name, and this is narrating the story from one single character, from an onlooker who's looking in and he's only confined to that one character and reiterating the story. So third person limited is what that is. Lastly, we have third person omniscience, and this is one of the most common forms of point of view that we see in almost all stories, and particularly epics. So the third person omniscient, to be omniscient means to know everything that is going on at all times. Omniscient means that you're all wise, all knowing. You're kind of this godlike figure, knowing all the characters' thoughts, feelings, and motives, as if you have this camera just panning across them and being able to zoom in on what they're thinking. But note that the narrator is not in the story, but rather external to the story. And this is what we see in the Odyssey. So there are points in the Odyssey where Odysseus himself is narrating from his flashbacks, which would make it what? It would make it first person point of view, and that's in books 9 to 12. However, for the majority of the epic, the narration is from a third person omniscient point of view. So we have this narrator who's all-knowing. He knows what's going on about the characters' minds, what's going on from the past, present, to future. And this is exemplified in almost all the scenes, but the particular one that I selected was from Argus. And this is what the narrator says. But when he knew he heard Odysseus' voice nearby, he did his best to wag his tail, nose down with flattened ears. So we have pronouns such as he, in there, his, and the dog. So we can see that this is an onlooker trying to look inside, but he's all knowing and knowing what the dog is doing and what the dog is thinking. Okay. So to summarize everything, the point of view questions the sense of immediacy between the reader and the story. So we have the reader being the closest to the narrator in the second person point of view, because you yourself would be immersed in the story. You would be the protagonist, and therefore you would land somewhere in the left where you're very close to the story. You're very immersed in what you're following along in terms of plot. The second one in line would be first person, and this is when you're participating in the protagonist's thoughts, mental processes, the plot altogether, and this was exemplified by Percy Jackson. Third person limited would be the one following after that, kind of falling in the middle, and we have, so third person limited would kind of fall in the middle, where we have one character's point of view, kind of an onlooker looking at a single character and what he or she is thinking. And then, of course, third person omniscient, the onlooker is even farther. So think of zooming out, and he knows all the characters' thoughts, what's going on all over the place, what they're thinking at all times. So think of it as a spectrum when we put on glasses. We're going to zoom in, we're either going to zoom out. Zooming in, we're kind of in second person. And then zooming out a little bit more, we're in first person. Moving out a little further, we're in third person. And of course, third person omniscient would be last, where you're kind of all knowing, you know what's going on at all times. And that concludes this presentation today.